Hey guys, and welcome to my top 5 tank specs in PvP. This will be in the order of what you're seeing now is the best tank spec in my opinion, and what you're seeing last is the worst tank spec in my opinion. However, excluded from this list I'd like to mention is Brewmaster. However, I'd put that on par with Prot Warrior, which is at the very bottom of my list. So starting at the top, Guardian Druid. Let's start off with the pros of Guardian Druid. We do a lot of damage for a tank spec. We have a lot of armor. We can gain armor through Iron Fur. We have very good self-healing through Frenzied Regen, and we can extend Frenzied Regen self-healing by a second with a certain trait. Frenzied Regen heals for 30% of your health over 3 seconds. Obviously, the higher health pool you have, the more effect you will get off this. So the damage is really good. The healing is really good, and you do have pretty good defensives. 20% damage reduction against all targets, so this will reduce the damage it does to anyone, not just you, but your healer, DPS, anyone in your battleground group. Barkskin, same thing except only you. 20% damage reduction. Survival Instincts, 50% damage reduction. So you do have a few damage reduction spells on top of self-healing spells, on top of decent damage, on top of decent mobility, with Cat Form, Sprint, Stampeding Roar, and Travel Form. One thing that I'd like to mention is the way healing works when you're Guardian Druid is that it's all based on your percent max health. So when you go in bear form, if you're at 100% max health, you're going to have 100% max health in bear form. So whenever you do shapeshift out of bear form and you throw heals your way, say you're at half health, you can pretty much top yourself off outside of bear form and then go back in bear form and then have all that health back. This is really good when you don't have any frenzied regens, and I've done it a few times in battlegrounds. But again, the self-healing, like, there's not a bad thing to Guardian Druid, in my opinion, right now. Which, it's pretty rare to see that in any World of Warcraft spec these days. Something that just doesn't have any cons to it. Other than, I suppose, being a tank spec. I can't think of anything bad about Guardian Druid. So if you haven't tried out Guardian Druid, I would highly suggest you do so. It also topped my top 5 fun specs to play in PvP. So, very fun, very good. I highly recommend you try it. So next on the list is Blood DK. The reason I picked Blood DK at the number 2 spot is because our self-healing is really good. I guess the cons to Blood DK is that our damage can be a little bit lower than other tank specs, but that's all made up for in your self-healing. Blood DKs, in my opinion, do have the strongest heals out of all the tanks. The reason Guardian Druid is above Blood DK is because its damage is crazy, and you do have a little more consistent defensives. And, I don't know, it's a Druid. I'm a furry at heart, what can I say? So the damage of Blood DK, not so good, but the self-healing is really good. With Vampiric Blood and all of your cooldowns being Rune Tap, Dancing Rune Weapon, Vampiric Blood, Anti-Magic Zone, and Anti-Magic Shell, you do have quite a bit of utility when it comes to casters. And then with melees, I suppose, you do just have a shit ton of armor. Obviously, Bone Shield gives you armor. Let's talk about Death Chain, too. Death Chain, I think, is one of the most unique abilities in the game. 20% of all damage taken to also be received by other targets in the chain. So let's say I use Death Chain in this group here. You'll see it applies to 3 targets. Just watch the Death Chain damage. Obviously not that great since I'm a tank. But the main reason this is good is because it's applied not only to your damage, but any damage a target takes is split 20% to any target it's chained to. This includes Greater Pyro. So, if you Greater Pyro someone for 100k health, it's gonna chain to a target for 20k health. Or the 2 targets it's connected to for 20k health. We'll showcase it here since the rogue's actually hitting stuff. Look at the Death Chain's damage. Just look at it. It's outrageous. It's completely outrageous for a tank ability. Like, it's probably number 1. Yeah, it's number 1 in my DPS. So, Death Chain's super fun. Self-healing, super good. You do have a few defensives: Rune Tap, Dancing Rune Weapon, Anti-Magic Shell, Anti-Magic Zone, and Vampiric Blood, which essentially just makes your healings on steroids. And you also have Dark Simulacrum, which I do think is one of the more fun abilities. You can spell Steel Blessing Protection, Divine Shield, all of those things. So Prot Pally is number 3 on the list. Let's go over the pros and cons. The pros: we do decent damage. Our Judgment, very low cooldown, hits for at least 10,000 every time. Also reduces the cooldown of our Hammer of Justice. I'll showcase the cooldown reduction. 1 minute cooldown, right? 1 minute cooldown on Hammer of Justice. All we have to do is press our... I don't even know what that ability is called. Hammer of the Righteous. We'll slowly get all of our Judgment procs back. And we're already at about 15-second cooldown on our 1 stun. This is obviously through talent, but you don't really take any other talent in that talent row. On top of that, we do have somewhat decent self-heals with Flash of Light and Lithe Protector. This is obviously buffs with Avenging Wrath, which will make it so your next Lithe Protector does always crit. You'll see here, 82,000 crit, not that bad for being at full health. And obviously that crit will be increased further up if you are missing health. On top of that, we do have damage reduction in our Consecration by about 7%. Something notable, but not something you should really be trying to maximize in PvP, but it is something to keep in the back of your head. On top of the stun we already have, we do have Shield of Virtue as well, which I'd like to add is the only blanket silence in the game right now outside of Shadow Priest Silence. It also has a 30-yard range, so I could apply it to essentially everyone in that group. You'll see everyone in that little 4-man group got silenced as a blanket silence for about 5 seconds. Pretty good for Arena. Outside of that, we just have the normal Pally shit, where we have Divine Shield, Lay on Hands, Freedom, Ardent Defender, and Guardian Forgotten Queen. I'd like to add that Guardian Forgotten Queen can be used on friendly targets, including yourself, and it's essentially just a 10-second bubble. It's just another bubble. So that's something, if you like having 2 bubbles, then consider playing Prot Pally. We also have Ardent Defender. I think everyone knows what this does, but reduces damage you take, and then if you do die while this is active, it will bring you back to 20% of your maximum health. Another noteworthy thing, Blessing of Spell Warding. With this super heavy caster meta, this is really good when it comes to Greater Pyro or Chaos Bolts. It's essentially replace your Blessing Protection, and then switches it with Blessing of Spell Warding, which again just makes you immune to spells for 10 seconds. That's about it. The only reason this is lower than Blood DK is because the self-healing isn't as great as Blood DK. But the damage, I'd say, it has a little bit of an edge over Blood DK, just single target damage. When you don't compare it to Blood Chains or Death Chains, if you do compare it to Death Chains, I suppose it's probably the same damage, but just single target, Prot Pally definitely does some more damage than Blood DK. So number 4 on this list, or the second worst tank spec in the game in my opinion, is Vengeance Demon Hunter. Let's talk about the pros first. We can leap. We have this one ability called Infernal Strike. It is heavily abused in Battlegrounds consistently. You'll see that, yeah, that's why it's abused. You can pretty much leap in very hard to reach places in one global, and the cooldown of it is very, very low. It's really strong. Throughout the entirety of Legion, every tank was Vengeance, and they'd abuse this mechanic. In Twin Peaks and Warsong, they just jump from lower level to upper level, lower level to upper level. So that's why they're pretty strong. Now let's talk about why they're weak. Our self-healing isn't that great compared to Prot Pally, Guardian Druid, Blood DK. It's pretty weak, actually. You'll see here, I'm going to use the Soul Cleave. Heals for 10,000. By the way, I have 400,000 health and I'm not even geared, but my one heal heals for 10,000. Quick maths, that is 1/40th of my health pool. Counting the souls, which I absorb, I believe 3 of whenever I use... Sorry, 2. Those souls only give me 4,000 health back. So I'm getting about 20,000 health through my one main ability, which, again, the damage on it, it's not bad, but it does barely more damage than Sheer. Like, my Mangle hits harder than my huge combo point spender. Or point spender's Vengeance. So the healing's not great, the damage isn't great, the mobility is good. Our defensives, in my opinion, aren't that great. We have Demon Spikes, which is the only thing we have. We used to have a magic one, which I don't think we have anymore. It was like Dilute Magic or something, but that's out of the game. Why would we need that? I think it's a passive now, honestly. Somewhere around here. Exclude what I said. So we just kind of get shit on by magic damage. I mean, our healing is just not that great. We have good mobility, but that's like the only redeeming factor. I don't know. I used to like Vengeance a lot, now it's just kind of eh. Doesn't really do much. Feel like I tickle people. And obviously against people with any sort of armor whatsoever, since all of your damage is mostly physical damage, excluding Immolation Aura and Fiery Brand and the Sigil of Flame, you're just really not going to be doing a whole lot of damage, and not really going to be doing a whole lot of healing. So, yeah, I don't know. It is above Prot Warrior, which is at the very bottom of my list, and I'll explain why it is in a little bit, but... Play all the other 3 take specs before you play this. I'd even dare say play Brewmaster before you play Prot Pally and Vengeance Demon Hunter too. But yeah, please fix Blizzard. So at the very bottom of my list, the worst fucking tank in the game right now. Should be no surprise to anyone who has heard me ramble about Prot Warrior. It's Prot Warrior. What was once one of the most fun specs in the game with Gladiator Stance, Concussive Blow, just so many expansions where it was really, really decent. It feels like a shame to see where it is now. Essentially, Prot Warrior, you're trying to do damage, but you don't have any damage mitigation. You're essentially a DPS with bad DPS, and you're a tank with bad tanking abilities, so it's like it doesn't know what it wants to be. The one thing it has going for itself is shield slams, and by the way, I deleted my shield on this tune, / sold it, so I don't have to play Prot Warrior. That should say something about how fucking bad it is. But if you want to play Prot, I'll list the things going for you. Our shield slams, they can hit hard. I think I've hit a 30k shield slam, which kind of redeemable for a tank spec, but you know, the DPS specs do way more damage, and arguably they're more tanky in my opinion, but shield slam can hit quite a bit of damage. You gain 15% increased damage through this, 30% increased damage through heavy repercussions, and then Avatar gives you another 20%. Add Berserking onto that. That is what? 30, 60, 80, 95% increase on your shield slam damage if you do that correctly. That's the one thing you have going for you. And Dragon Charge. I always forget about this one. Dragon Charge, it's really good for Eye of the Storm and Alteric Valley, because you can charge people off a bridge. That's all it is, though. And 20-second cooldown on that, by the way. Now let's talk about the cons. Ignore Pain. Our one defensive essentially makes it so we take 50% less damage, but still takes damage. On top of that, I don't think Shield Block is that great of a defensive whatsoever, at least in PvP. In PvE, maybe so, but in PvP, no, it's pretty bad. And then our 2 defensives, Last Stand, good amount of health on a low cooldown, but again, 2-minute cooldown just gives you max health. I don't know, not like it's not that great. And then the one good cooldown we have, Shield Wall, reduces all damage you take by 40% for 8 seconds. This is weird. This is weird to me because you think about Blood DK, it has the same thing, 40%. I think it's maybe 25% or 40% damage reduction on Rune Tap, but use 2 of those charges. 25-second recharge time. So in the window of 1 shield wall, you gain, what, 6 rune taps? Arguably 10 times better, and you have to wait 4 minutes for that to be back up, so, yeah. Even talking about Prot Warrior, I'm just like, God, what did they do? I really hope you guys like this video. I'd highly suggest you play Guardian Druid first, Blood DK second, Protection Paladin third, Brewmaster fourth, even though it's not included in this list, Vengeance fifth, and then Shit Prot sixth. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, description, bell thing, check out Twitch, check out Twitter, and until next time, guys.